Militarily Speaking, episode 21, Veterans Community Project, otherwise known as VCP.
This episode, we talk with Bryan Meyer, CEO and co-founder of Veterans Community Project.
Welcome to Militarily Speaking, brought to you by Armed Forces Bank. This is Tom McLean and the wonderful Jodi Vickery as my co-host.
I never know quite how you're going to introduce me.
I know. But wait a minute. Before we get to Bryan, I got a couple of things for you.
Yes.
How was the Christmas and holiday break for you?
It was good. It was kind of chill and non-eventful, which is the best kind. How about you?
Chill. Yeah, it was chill, but it was nice in the Bahamas.
Literally chill.
Yeah, first cruise. But remember that Christmas tradition you told me about wearing pajamas in the morning? Did you do it again this year?
We did. We had on K-State pajamas this year because my son has decided he's going to K-State.
When did he decide?
Recently, we'll say. When we talked about how much out-of-state tuition was for University of Alabama.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. But one other thing I want to clear the air about. I understand you took another gig on the side in my absence. Is that right? Did you do some sort of podcast or video with somebody else?
Maybe.
Okay. How'd it go? It wasn't as good, was it?
Well, we can talk about that offline.
Okay. That's my personal segue.
Sorry, Bryan.
Is that okay?
He does this.
Bryan, we're back.
No, it's okay. Right.
Yes.
I think that was a very relevant line of questioning there.
It actually is never relevant.
If she's doing stuff, she should let me know, right? If she's doing some other podcast.
Oh, my goodness. Podcast cheating. Okay, I'm going to reel this back in and introduce our very special, most important co-founder of Veterans Community Project. So again,
off to a great start.
Yes, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you listening and learning about Veterans Community Project with our guest, Bryan Meyer, again, CEO and co-founder of Veterans Community Project. I want to introduce you to him and tell you just a little bit about him. Bryan served 2 tours in Iraq as a helicopter crew chief and door gunner in the United States Marine Corps. After returning home to Kansas City, he earned both a master's in public administration and a law degree from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, my alma mater. So we have that in common. Yeah. Yes, go Roos. Bryan left the practice of law early and along with his co-founders invested his personal savings to co-found the Veterans Community Project, a walk-in clinic for all veterans and a village of tiny houses with wraparound case management services for homeless veterans in Kansas City. In their short existence, it has already transitioned hundreds of Kansas City area veterans out of homelessness and provided services to thousands more. Today, VCP is one of the fastest growing veterans nonprofits in America with campuses under construction nationwide. And Bryan leads this great organization as its chief executive officer.
You also know that he was alumnus of the year in 2022 at UMKC, right?
He's a Roo. I would expect nothing less.
Yeah.
I was. That was the most recent thing. That was pretty cool. Yeah. Although really undeserving. Like I was the first graduate of the law school to get that award, which blew my mind because there are so many great people that went through there. So luckily next year, the winner is an old professor of mine. And now I feel like the standard has been reset. Like me, it was a down year. It was like the COVID year. And now they're getting back to that more prestigious, rank of individual.
I am sure that is not the case. Well, welcome, Bryan. Tom and I are really happy you've joined us. And to kick us off today, it'd be great if you could just tell our listeners what inspired you to start the Veterans Community Project. It's a great story that you've shared with us when we were at your facilities.
Absolutely. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me. This is great. I love any opportunity to speak to anyone about this, but specifically those who are so invested in the military community and have such ties and give back as well. The motivation, a lot of it, you kind of hit right there with that introduction. So I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years. And after I got out, I like to be pretty open about the fact that like so many other people, I had my own struggles with my transition. And, there was actually a point in time where I'm standing in front of this judge and this judge is looking at me and going, hey, you can either go to jail for a little bit or you can enroll in community college, get some counseling and straighten yourself out there. So I went to jail for a little bit. And then after I got out of jail, I figured I didn't want to do that again. So I enrolled in community college.
Good choice.
Which is not what happened. I took him up on his offer. I did enroll in community college, and fast forward a number of years, and I was able to graduate. Got a couple advanced degrees, and it was actually when I was getting ready to graduate law school, I really had that realization that looking back at that time, a step left, a step right, I'm a very different person. And not everybody who got out of the military got that lucky break that I did or got that chance. So I wanted to create something that provided more opportunities. So I actually started a nonprofit getting veterans free legal services, which still exists, but I'm no longer a active part of it. And it was through that work I linked up with the other less important co-founders of Veterans Community Project.
There it is.
Yeah.
4 times he's going to say it.
Oh, I'll get it in there a few times. Don't worry.
I'm finding a new T-shirt idea here.
Oh yeah, most. I should just get a button and wear it
on the back of every shirt
do.
that you wear. Yes.
Yeah. That way they know it's my shirt. Now they'll just steal them from me,
or put it on your business card and be done with it,
or just tattoo it on my body.
Do all of the above. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was through that work that I met these other co-founders, and we were all vets. We were all in the Kansas City area, and we were all kind of operating outside of the current systems to help veterans. And most importantly, we were really working with the homeless veteran population and dealing with this issue of how do you take a veteran from street homeless and then really set them up for long-term success, right? Not just slap a roof over their head and call it good, but really make an impact that will ensure that they're stable for a long time to come, right? The other side of it, which was mentioned, is just general access of service to veterans, right? So many people have this idea, you've ever been in the military, you can simply show up at a VA and, say, hey, I'm here. And it's like, come on in, sit right down and let's get rolling. And unfortunately, it's just not like that. That's how it should be. So out of those frustrations and ideas came Veterans Community Project, which is a walk-in clinic for veterans. It's a brick and mortar. You can just walk in the door and we will start assisting you. And then the other thing, which we're more well known for, are our villages of tiny homes as transitional housing. But more importantly, we have on-site wraparound case management.
Aren't those tiny houses awesome?
They are. We had the chance to go see those. Brian was kind enough to give us a tour, and it's an amazing setup.
And they range from 240 square feet to 320 square feet for a family.
Yeah, that's correct. And since you opened the opportunity here, one of the things I want to throw out there is, anybody listening might hear us say tiny house and they have a certain idea in their head of what that is. And most of the time that idea is around something they've seen on TV. Right. It's on a trailer or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
And
HGTV.
as you guys know, yeah, exactly. One of my good buddies hosts a show called Tiny House Nation. And the amount of times people think that we're building like what he does on that TV show, it's understandable, but it's misguided because as a veteran, that's not the standard that I want for other veterans. So as you guys know, those houses are built slab on grade. They're stick built. They're built to 2018 building codes. They're built just like any other home, only smaller.
Can you tell our listeners, Brian, a little bit about VCP's solution to provide support for both the Veteran Outreach Center and the VCP Village, and explain how the veterans can transition between them?
Yeah, so I'll start with the Outreach Center. So as I mentioned, it is a walk-in clinic for veterans to come in and do what I mentioned earlier, which is, hey, I'm here, I need assistance, and we can start to get the ball rolling. And when I say that, I mean it's extremely low barrier in the way that the only qualification to receive services is that you've ever taken the oath to serve our country. So if you're in the military 1 day or 30 years, you qualify for all our programs and services. It doesn't matter about discharge status, active versus reserve. We also serve National Guard, which is a population that goes overlooked a lot. So what you can do is you can come in, and we don't necessarily, Veterans Community Project doesn't house all these programs ourselves. What we've done is we've gone out to the community and said, okay, you're a car mechanic, or you're a dentist, or you provide this type of service that a veteran may need assistance with. Would you be willing to partner with us and take referrals? And the answer is almost always a overwhelming amount of enthusiasm and support to do it. So that's kind of that one side of the house. Now, oftentimes we get people that show up that are either homeless or housing insecure or something like that. That's when we can start the referral to the residential program, which is what I mentioned earlier, the community tiny homes and the on-site case management. The whole idea is that when we move somebody in, well, let me put it this way. If somebody's worried about where am I going to sleep? What am I going to eat? Am I safe? They're not really worried about how's my mental health? What's my employment like? Do I have addiction issues? Any of that. So we start with those hierarchies. We move somebody in right away, right? Now they are safe, secure. There's food in the refrigerator. They're good to go. Then we pair them with the case manager and create a case management plan tailored to that individual. So often you have programs that are very cookie cutter, and what we like to do is say, like, homelessness is complicated and getting out of homelessness is even more complicated. So we have to take a very individualized approach with which each veteran we work with.
Oh, I love that. You kind of deal with the things that I would say are almost survival basics so that they can start to take a breath and lean into making a difference to change the circumstance.
I think what's also cool, when we were there, you said, it's non-discriminatory, right? The VA kind of puts you through a lot of the rigmarole and might say you don't qualify for certain benefits or certain eligibility that's in place for them. And I also like the fact that in your village with the homes, there's that common bond, right, between the veterans that are there. And, if Jodi were to buy a house in, I don't know, Honolulu or something, she's not going to know who her neighbor is, right? And it's almost like you have an instant bond and an instant understanding of who your neighbors are and that they all get along, and it's a great tight-knit community. So
or even the sheriff that we saw walking around the village that day.
Yeah. The sheriff.
The sheriff, yes.
Yes. He monitors that place. But you're exactly right. I think it's one of the intangible things that makes our program so successful, right? Is that shared experience you have with everyone. I mean, like, come on, a veteran meets a veteran. Even if they don't know each other, they're not perfect strangers. They have that little bit that they can bond and use that to develop an overall relationship. And we see that in the village all the time.
Yep, that's definitely true. See that with my husband. I want to touch on too, when we introduced you, we said that VCP is one of the fastest growing veterans nonprofits in America. Can you talk about that? What does that mean? Where are you expanding? Maybe even let listeners know if they're interested in putting together a working group, reaching out to you in terms of how to bring VCP to their community. What would they do to begin that process?
Absolutely. So in terms of expansion and the rate of it, I should probably give a little bit of timeline about when this all started.
Sure.
So it was the summer of 2016 when me and the other co-founders decided to leave our full-time jobs. I left my law firm and we went all in on this. Now, at that time, we had nothing, right? We had an idea, we had some papers, and we were working out of each other's kitchens. We started housing people in early 2018, right? So since that time, we're now here in Kansas City, but also in Boulder County, Colorado, Longmont specifically, St. Louis, Sioux Falls, Milwaukee, and most recently Oklahoma City. Now, that's not necessarily as fast as we could have done this, meaning that the demand has been more than we can handle, meaning lots of different groups reaching out, bring this to our city, bring this to our city. We're trying to grow in a way that is responsible to the service we're providing, meaning that if we grew too fast, we would jeopardize the quality of services, which is the most important thing to us. So we're trying to scale at a rate that we can ensure that we will, uphold the highest amount of service delivery. To the point of how could somebody find more information about that, or if they're curious about possibly bringing Veterans Community Project to their community, or just learning more about it, like the best place is always our website, veteranscommunityproject.org, or just simply vcp.org. And on there, there's actually an ability to get a whole packet of information about, like, hey, if you're interested in VCP in your city, here's all the things we look for when we're trying to determine what the next right place is. Because I think everybody knows the demand is everywhere, right? Homelessness, veteran homelessness, it's everywhere. The scale of it is different, but the issue is everywhere. So we don't necessarily just say, hey, we want to go the place where the scale is the highest. There's more to it than just that.
Yeah, I remember you sharing with us when we visited just about making sure it's a community that's ready to embrace that, to embrace your mission while you're there on the ground, and really making a partnership of it versus coming in and sort of being a stranger on the periphery of a community. So
exactly.
Brian, how far along are the other 5 locations around the country as far as compared to Kansas City?
Yeah, so Kansas City it's always going to be so much further than every other city,
right? Because
so Kansas City is 100% built, right? Well, even though we started housing in 2018, we build these slowly in order, like that's for a lot of reasons. It's for community involvement. It's for fundraising purposes, right? Because there's no magic bag of federal dollars we reach into or state dollars to make this happen. So even though we started housing, it was 2021 before we finished that village, right? So Longmont, Colorado, that one, we've been providing outreach services and doing all that. We're getting ready to open the first round of houses soon. We have a full-on ribbon cutting in St. Louis in a couple months, and I don't remember the date off the top of my head. Plus, I'd probably get in trouble if I said it because who knows if I actually know it? They'll just tell me.
But it'll be on your website. It'll be on your website eventually, right? The date?
Exactly. Always the website or our social media.
VCP.org.
Somebody will tell you when to show up, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sioux Falls, houses are being built. Milwaukee, Oklahoma City, we're still kind of in that what I call the quiet mode, the fundraising mode. Develop a lot of that stuff. That way we can hit the ground running when we put shovels in the ground.
But you have 50 houses here in Kansas City with 49 were occupied. Is that right? Are you at full occupancy now?
Yeah, so we have 49 houses here, and what we strive for is 85% occupancy.
Right.
That's always about the number we want. There's 2 reasons there, and this is a perfect way for me to kind of plug one part of the program, which is you guys got to experience when you walk in that home, everything in there is brand new, right? It's, linens, towels, dishes, TV, desk, but it's all brand new, right? When a veteran moves out, they take all that with them. You want to take the TV, the fridge, whatever it is, you take it with you. We reset that house and make it brand new for the next person. That's really important to us. So there's always what we call the flip stage of houses. So when somebody transitions out, we flip the house and get it ready for the next person. So that creates some vacancy. The other reason you want to have some vacancy is so that you can address emergency situations, right? Meaning that I had one of my all-time favorite veterans we've helped. His house burned down. He's 85 years old, right? He went from homeowner to 85 years old, homeless with a dog, like overnight, all right? That person's at a really, really high risk factor to be homeless. So we were able to just simply go down, open the door and say, okay, you can move in. Same thing actually happened with Terrence, the guy that you guys were referring to, the village sheriff.
Yeah, the
right?
sheriff, yeah.
Who walks around and keeps an eye on everything. His apartment complex caught on fire. He was homeless instantly. We were able to just immediately move him in. So we always strive for about 85% occupancy. That's kind of what we found our sweet spot is.
Thank you for that. Talk about how our listeners can give donations or buy a brick. Can you dive into the impacts you've made on transitioning veterans to permanent housing and how providing permanent housing increases the income of the veterans? And these are a lot of questions in one. Can you remember all these things, Brian? I'm going to keep going. But how many visits to the VCP Outreach Center in Kansas City have you had? And a little bit about where you are with this. So just to encapsulate all that I said to you too, just talk about the visits, talk about how our listeners can get involved in the organization too.
Absolutely. To answer your first question, no, I will not remember. So please feel free to say, Brian, that's not the question I answered. Stop talking about whatever you want to talk about. In order to get involved, and this is really important, that thing I talked about where we take all veterans, right? 1 day in the military or 30 years, discharge status, all that. We can only do that because we've made the difficult decision to operate entirely based off donations and goodwill. Meaning if we took those federal dollars and often a lot of state dollars, restrict the veterans you can serve. And we just won't compromise that part of the organization, right? So we do heavily depend on generosity and donation. The best place to figure out all the ways to give back, from buying a brick to coming out and volunteering, any of that, or just straight, monetary donation, is, again, the website, vcp.org, veteranscommunityproject.org. In terms of, I think at first you asked me about transitioning veteran.
Yeah. Well,
he doesn't even remember what he asked you, Brian.
No, but I think talking about, maybe you have a real life example of how somebody transitioned from that sort of temporary housing, if you will, to go to permanent housing. So walk through that process and maybe have a real life example.
Absolutely. So going big picture and then bringing it into the individualized level. When I talk about why we got attention and why we were getting a lot of requests from other communities, and something that I didn't even really anticipate was our transition success rate. Meaning that, just to give some context, a lot of transitional shelters and living facilities, if they're transitioning 20 to 25% of everybody coming through, that's pretty great for them. We've been positively transitioning about 85% of all the veterans that come through our program.
That's a big number.
So,
yeah.
And it's something we're really proud of. And what that looks like for an individual is, going back to that idea, when they move in, we have, even though the case management programs are individualized, they're based off of what we call our pillars of support, right? So it's all based off these 5 pillars, which are health and wellness, income stability, fiscal understanding, education and training, and network of support, right? And we evaluate all 5 of those things. We have a point scale. That point scale creates an aggregate score, which we call our permanent housing readiness score. And when the aggregate score gets to a certain point, that's when we have a good feeling that they're going to be long-term successful. One good example I can give, I talked about the veteran whose house burned down. There's another vet that he was dishonorably discharged from the military. Therefore, he couldn't access any programs and services. But he was dishonorably discharged because he had a few DUIs. And he had a few DUIs in between deployments. And it was obvious this individual was suffering from post-traumatic stress. Mm-hmm. And at that point, so there he is, he's out of the military, he's got a dishonorable discharge, and he's suffering from post-traumatic stress. So he doesn't really qualify for these other programs and services, right? Well, we're able to bring him in, work through that discharge status, right? Get that overturned. Not only get that overturned, but then service connect his post-traumatic stress. So now he's getting income again, right? So those are 2 huge things. Then we can slowly start to do that counseling, hooking them up with resources, getting them used to going to the VA or other appointments as necessary, and just get them used to kind of that functioning as an individual in an overall community again. And then at the end of the day, we're able to move this individual out into his own place, and he's doing really well. So I tried to tell his story without giving away too much personal information, right. But that's kind of the big picture of it, right? But that dishonorable discharge, that PTSD, look, we don't shy away from the fact, it led him down a bad path. He did some things that he's not proud of, but overcoming that, and recognizing his service and revalidating his service. This is somebody who didn't even like to refer to himself as a veteran because he didn't feel like he was because of his discharge status, mm-hmm. right? This guy's got 2 combat tours, right? He's a veteran. We can work on that.
Yeah, you probably made it seem like a very overwhelming situation to him by himself could be dealt with one step at a time, one day at a time. Definitely.
Yeah.
I also love the story that you shared with us about a gentleman moving into the community, reestablishing residency and address, and giving him the opportunity to start to see his kids again because he had a place for them to come for visitation. So, so many good stories. I bet we could probably do a whole nother podcast series on success stories coming out of the village for sure. I want to see if you want a chance just to talk about a couple of other resources that are on the website. We've talked about vcp.org. Mm-hmm. We've got emergency assistance, the Ride KC, kind of a local opportunity, Veterans Pass, and the Veterans Crisis Line. Maybe spend just a minute or two sharing about those services as well.
Yeah. So those services all comes from our outreach center, right? So the Veteran Crisis Line itself, that's not Veterans Community Project specific. We just always like to make sure that we place that resource there, because if a veteran's on our site and they're looking for what services we provide, we want to make sure that we're always like, hey, these resources are out there. Even if they're not ours, please make sure that you're accessing them. So the emergency assistance, that is where a veteran who may be struggling with a utility bill, a car repair, something like that, can come to us, and we're able to do exactly what it says, which is, provide some financial assistance in these particular cases. Now, I will say it is really important to us. One of the things we engage in is if somebody comes to us and they say, hey, I'm behind on my utility bills, it's not going to be so easy as, great, here's your utility bill check, right? Because that's the Band-Aid. And what we want to do is we want to figure out, like, why are you behind on that utility bill, right? Well, I'm behind on the utility bill because I've missed work a bunch. Well, why have you missed work a bunch? Because I don't have reliable transportation. Boom, let's focus on that, right? Let's get the utility bill paid, but now let's focus on that issue. That way you're not coming to us every couple months, right?
Yep.
So we do a little bit of a deeper dive on vets that come in and look for that. The bus pass program, that's actually the first program we ever rolled out, which was any veteran could come to us and get a bus pass that allowed them to ride the bus for free permanently. Actually, it was so successful in Kansas City that the city council and the mayor used our numbers off of that, the increased ridership and some of our success stories from being able to not have to make the choice between bus fare and other monetary needs, to actually roll and pass a resolution to give free rides to all Kansas Cityans on the bus. So
very good. Very good.
So, Bryan, if a veteran or others would like to see the village, and Jodi and I and our chief legal officer, we kind of bombarded you and just invited ourselves to go visit those houses. But if people want to, if people want to take a gander and have sort of a tour, how does that get facilitated?
Yeah, well, I mean, just so you know, I felt bad. You were standing outside the door, just knocking on it for like 2 hours. So I feel like I finally had to just.
It started to be weird, right? Yeah, it was a little odd.
Yeah, you had to staring through the glass with the sad puppy eyes for a couple hours. I was finally like, all right, come on, man, let's go look at this village.
Tom brings the weird everywhere we go.
But that was after our 7th time trying to get you to take us.
That's true. I could ignore you for a while. Trust me.
Yeah.
Persistent, I think, is the preferred.
All right. Yeah. So back. Did I just ask him a question?
Yeah, you did. You actually asked a question. Sorry. The question being, if anybody else would like to learn more about the organization or come take a tour, I'm going to sound like a broken record. The website's the best place to start, or our social media. We do scheduled tours, like on a weekly basis and things like that, as well as you can sign up to get notified about all the volunteer opportunities. And that's site specific. So you can say, look, I'm in this city. I want to hear about volunteer opportunities here. Or you can reach out and try to schedule an individualized tour if those group times don't work for you.
And if that doesn't work, come sit with your face pressed against the glass.
Actually, the last option I would recommend is...
Which one's your window exactly again?
Yeah.
Although we did meet your dog that day, and I don't think I'd be messing with trying to get into the building without.
Yeah, that's true. He's a sweetheart.
I remember you got a little out of control that time too, Bryan, when you wondered why nobody's helping you with the dog, right? Why can't people take the dog out?
Yeah, I know, right? I asked somebody, I'm like, hey, I'm about to go out, go on a tour. The dog's got to go to the bathroom. And I asked one of the less important co-founders if he'd take the dog out. He got really with me.
Oh, yeah. We're going to have to edit this one hard.
That's embarrassing, We got company here, giving a tour, trying to put our best foot forward, and you're just talking back. It's crazy.
So that founder is now in the doghouse.
Literally.
How about that one?
He that was very, very good, but that would be no surprise. He pretty much lives there.
All right.
This is so going off the rails. It's hard to keep track of where we even were, really. Got a couple more questions for you. We wanted to hear about any past events that you have done. Have they been hosted? What are the ways that you are engaging either in our community here in Kansas City or others to raise awareness for VCP? Where might folks find you other than the website?
Yeah, one of the most important things we do is raise awareness, because out of awareness comes connection to other veterans, meaning that there are veterans out there right now, and I'm very aware of this. There are veterans out there right now that need our programs and services and simply are unaware of them. And sometimes the best way that somebody becomes aware is a recommendation from a family or friend, right? So the more people we can make aware, the more recommendations happen. That being said, we do a lot of targeted outreach where we actually go to areas and seek these individuals who may be out on the streets or camping or whatever that is. In terms of the public awareness event, so we in Kansas City, we have our annual event, which we call the House Party. And that is every year it's the first week in November. And that's just bringing everybody together in one spot and celebrating all the work we've done, raise some money, tell some stories, and talk about all the great things that is permeating from Kansas City, like across the country, right? Like this is changing the way that every city is looking to address homelessness. And it's all stemming right here from Kansas City. And I think it's something that we as a community should be really proud of. Additional events, we have a lot of people who want to host a golf tournament for us, right, or, a bingo night or poker tournament or whatever it is. We always want to do those things, right? Show up, see everybody, give a little, presentation about us, and then enjoy the event. So there's a lot of different ways.
I think we're coming to the finish line, right?
Brian's probably very grateful.
We're going to talk a little bit more about vcp.org, but we'll keep talking about that website. But there is a merch shop out there, and I'm a concert guy, Jodi, and I have a Backstreet Boys and a New Kids on the Block shirt that I'd much rather wear a VCP shirt. Yeah.
Wait, doesn't it? You already told me that in order for me to be allowed to come on this podcast, that I had to send you a dozen shirts first. Are you about to pry more out of me?
Are you doing sketchy things, Tom?
You didn't get the podcast bribe yet?
You also didn't get the update that it wasn't just a dozen. So I don't know what your issue is. Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, let's wrap this up by having, well, thank goodness, right, Jodi?
Right, you're going to get so much trouble.
Wrap it up with any other things you want to say about VCP. You've covered a lot of ground. We've asked a lot of great questions, thanks to Michelle, and bring us home.
I think the first thing I want to do that I never actually get to do or don't always have the opportunity is just thank everyone. And by that, I mean, we don't do what we do without supporters, without anybody that's listening, without you inviting me on here to talk about it, without the person that volunteers, without the person that gives $5, without the person that gives $500. Like, as passionate as I may be about this and as hard as I may work, there's no way I can do this on my own, or me and the co-founders can do this on our own. That's why we put community central to our name, because it takes the community to do this. But that's also an empowering thing, meaning that like us as a community, we don't have to wait on somebody else to address this issue. We can address this issue if we all just come together and work on it. And we're doing that here. So if there's anything I could say that's been unsaid, it's just thank you.
Well said, Bryan. You cover a lot of ground in your collateral materials that you have available inside your shop too. And I just loved some of the quotes you have there: an oath to serve all who served us. And it takes a village to heal a village. That kind of pulled at my heartstrings too. But when I looked at some Google reviews about VCP too, I just wanted to read one quote that's out there. It says, "This organization is incredible. It's truly amazing how many veterans' lives are impacted positively due to VCP's outreach into the community. Super impressed. Great service for vets, awesome group of people, and a fantastic staff." If that doesn't sum up what great stuff you're doing in the communities that you serve, I don't know what would. Just fantastic comments about your organization.
Thank you. And thank you for choosing the review that I wrote. I think it's pretty good too.
It was well written either way, really. Yes.
Because certainly a second-rate founder wouldn't write something that eloquent. Yeah.
No, they can't even write. They struggle with that part.
Well, I'm going to give us an escape hatch here.
Are we going to do the military minute?
So we need Bryan to hang with us for just a couple more minutes because we're going to do this endearing little game called the Military Minute to close us out.
Which I've missed.
I know. Well,
It's been a month.
Yeah. So have you been waiting with anticipation?
But the answer to that last question?
Yeah. So it's been a while. Do you even remember the question? Last week's Military Minute on our last podcast was a question about the Military Family Advisory Network. The question was, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, food insecurity nationwide is approximately at what percent? Did you answer on the social media sites?
I think it's 10.
Very well played. I think you probably read it in your script, but
it
is 10%.
I just looked at it. Yep.
So hopefully you got that answer right. Watch for the announcement of our winner. I'll tell you what you won in just a minute. But fast forward to this week's Military Minute topics.
Is it about VCP?
It is.
Yeah.
We have an uncanny way of tying the Military Minute to our guest of the day. Yeah, keep up, Tom. So you heard this answer today in our discussion. You cannot answer, Bryan.
It's all right. I probably would have got it wrong.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think you'd get it right. What was the success rate of transitioning veterans from homelessness to permanent sustainable housing in 2021? So if you didn't pay attention or you're not inclined to do the research, you have to wait until next week to know the answer. But if you listened or you do the research and you know the answer, jump on our Facebook or Instagram account and respond with that answer when we drop this podcast, and you'll earn $50 for yourself and $50 for a charity of your choice. We have just today identified a charity that would be well suited for such a donation.
Should be of a lot of people's choices.
Yes, I would think so. But thank you again, Bryan, for spending time with us. And for our listeners, be sure to learn more about everything that you heard today at vcp.org or veteranscommunityproject.org.
And Jodi, if you enjoyed today's episode as much as Bryan enjoyed listening to himself, go out to afbank.com and subscribe to the show. Also, make sure to rate us. Leave us a comment on your favorite podcast platform, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify. And Bryan, we are on YouTube, and we're an international phenom.
Tom thinks he's famous.
I believe it.
Heaven help us.
I'm not even going to poke holes in that. I 100% believe it.
In his own mind. Thank you for being a good sport today, and more importantly, for sharing about Veterans Community Project.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bryan.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Copyright 2022 Armed Forces Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender. All non-Armed Forces Bank owned apps, websites, company names, and product names are trademarks or registered trademarks of their respective owners. Their mention does not imply any affiliation with or endorsement by Armed Forces Bank of them or their products and services. They are merely used as examples of the many available apps, companies, and websites that offer similar services. Before using any app or website, you should carefully review the terms of use, data collection, and privacy policy. Apps may have an initial cost or in-application purchase features. This information is general in nature and is not intended to be legal, tax, or financial advice. Although Armed Forces Bank believes this information to be accurate, it cannot ensure that it could change. Statements or opinions of individuals referenced herein are their own, not Armed Forces Bank. Consult an appropriate professional concerning your specific situation and respective governing bodies for applicable laws, such as IRS.gov for current tax law. Armed Forces Bank, the Armed Forces Bank logo, and the Militarily Speaking logo are registered trademarks of Armed Forces Bank.